Shrimanta Ji, Felicity,
Yes,
thank you, Ji, and Alex Henshaw.
yes,
Thank you for
Shravani,
joining
good to
us
you.
this morning on Shri Ganesha's birthday. It's being celebrated as Vasant Panchami as well in India and all over. Um, Alex is joining us from Australia this
Yeah.
morning, which is night time there. So thank you for the effort. And Felicity, thanks for being instrumental in making this happen. Um, Alex, should we start with you and ask you how and where you were when you got your realization? What was your first meeting with Shrimati Nirmala Devi like?
Well, I'll start, from the story with how I came to get realization. My mother was listening to a radio program. We're based in Australia, so in Sydney, and Shramataji had come to Sydney for public programs in 1983. So she was interviewed by, quite a famous interviewer, and my mother was listening to the program. Was on the Australian Broadcasting Commission, Australian ABC Broadcasting Corporation. So she really felt something. Made so much sense for her. And then what really got her interested was when Shamaji said, this is an all-pervading power of God's love. All you need to do is put your hands out and have the pure desire, and you'll feel it. And my mother put her hands out, and then Shamaji blew into the mic of the radio station, and my mother felt like someone's blowing on her hands. She was very sensitive. She felt like someone's literally blowing on her hands. So that really got her interested. So she called my father and sort of rallied us around. But unfortunately for me, I was in the middle of my sort of mid semester exams and study period, so I was so busy that I actually missed the opportunity to see Shrimaliji. And when I was ready, she'd already left. She'd gone down, I think she'd gone back to India. So I missed the chance and I was so disappointed. But then I came and got my realization and had a very strong experience. And then it was so strong that I kind of, it just blew me away. And I was in this state, this bubble, this bliss bubble for about 2 weeks, just floating around, that I had all the answers to the problems of the world. And I felt this incredible connection with Mother, like I felt that, I've been with her for, before, and this was what I was supposed to be doing to serve her. So that was a feeling I had after realization. So it was very strong. So then after I came to the programs every week, sometimes 3 times a week. I was in the middle of my university degree and I was busy and then, trying to fit it in. And then I thought, well, I'm just going to move into the ashram. And my younger brother had already moved into the ashram because my younger brother, Rob, he was even more sort of keen than I was. So he moved in within a month. And then it took me a couple of months, but I eventually moved into the ashram. So I spent, you know, the first year of my life, of Sahaj life, was living in an ashram. So in Australia in those days, as Felicity will probably tell you, that it was quite regimented. It was like like being in the army. So we were getting up very early in the morning, 4:30, meditation at 5. The conch would go off, and I was living in the boys' dorm. So it was
Wow.
really, really disciplined. Then we'd have meditation. It was like, shoe beating first and then meditation for an hour. And then we'd have breakfast together, clean up the place. And then, we'd go off to uni and people would go to work. Then we'd come home in the evening. We have to do foot soaking. We'd have foot soaking. And then we'd have, evening meditation together. And we'd always sing arti at the end.
Mm.
And then we do our Sahaj jobs that we had. Like, I was doing all the video recording, making tapes and doing sort of, producing tapes for all the centers around. So we get the videotapes sent over usually from England, and then we'd duplicate them and send them out to the ashrams around Australia, and then we'd produce more so people could buy them. So that was a really busy time for me. I was in the middle of my degree, so I was studying, working. I didn't have much sleep during that time because it was like, getting back and doing my study and work for uni, and then doing my Sahaj work, and then the chores around the ashram. So it was a really, really busy time. But we were all joyful. We were all so excited that we'd found the truth. We had this incredible sort of dynamism of going out to programs, giving people realization. We just wanted to share it with everybody, and we were all very excited to get tapes of Mother, like it was
Yes.
the new tape of Mother's coming, and we were just so excited. And we'd listen to it again and again. We'd play it in meditation, we'd listen to it and really imbibe what Mother said, in the tapes. We tried to sort of, get to the essence of what it was about. So it was very, I would say, a very sort of intense period, to have that sort of background and training in the ashram. And then every year they have the India tour. So I had this, I'm definitely going to go to India. So I was saving up money. I was working a part-time job as well, saving up as much money as I could because I just wanted to go over to India and meet Mother. That was my objective at that time. So I started work, and then I told the boss straight away that, look, I'm going to be, after 3 months, I'll be traveling to England. That was my plan, and to India and stuff and do this big trip. So I'd saved up money for that. He said, "Oh, no, that's fine. You can work." So I was getting paid quite well and saving that money. And that was my sort of money that I used for traveling. So I ended up traveling to India, on the
Yeah.
India tour. And that was the first time I saw Mother. And it was
1984.
1983, 84 tour.
Okay.
So the end of 83, 84. So yeah. And then in those days, they had 8-week tours. Like they had, you could do two sets. And so I came for one of the, I think it was the second part of the tour. And then we arrived in Bordi, and then there were marriages in Bordi. And Bordi was before Ganapatapule. So Mother would be in Gujarat. So she, up from Mumbai on the coast. And it's not far from Nagar where she opened the Sahasrara. So this is where she used to have her, it was a big seminar. We're by the sea, and then all the yogis from the first tour would turn up. And then my brother turned up with malaria, and he was sweating. Well, we didn't know he had malaria, but he was just fever and sweating all the time. And then he wasn't well at all, so I was looking after him. And then he went back to Australia. Then he was sort of rushed to hospital because he had malaria. After he got it in, I think it was Aurangabad or somewhere. Anyway, so we went on this tour. It was just a tour where it was, as they say, you're having a clear out. So I think from the time I arrived, I started getting a cough. And then within the first days, I had dysentery. And then from there, it was like, downhill spiral. I was just literally living off rice and yogurt the whole time.
Oh dear.
I couldn't eat any of the food. Every time
Yeah.
I try, it would just sort of irritate the gut, and then I would just be another bout of diarrhea. So it was very tough for me in that, and I lost weight. I wasn't that, didn't have a lot of weight anyway. So I was just like, lost, like a skeleton. I was just so thin. So I enjoyed the tour for the 4 weeks. And then my plan was to go to England. So I went to England, and I went back with, met a lot of the English on the tour. And then Kingsley Flint, who was living in Brighton at the time,
Yes.
he just got married to Ruth. So that was in the weddings we went to. And then he said to me, "Come back to Brighton when you come back to England. You must come down to stay with us in Brighton at the ashram." And that's what I did. I went back to Brighton after that. And then gradually I recovered from the dysentery, went on for a couple of weeks, and then slowly got better, with all the Ajwan and all the things he used to take. And then, Mother was coming back to, I think it was February, she was coming back to London, to England. She was arriving at the airport at Heathrow. And that was all the yogis from England were gathering at the airport. So we all went there with flowers. Mother came, and we were giving the flowers, and we were all so excited to see Mother again because we left in India before she'd left, and then we came back to England, and then we saw Mother again. And then she took us, we gave flowers. She took all the flowers from everybody. So patient. I mean, I was just amazed. She was so fresh,
Yes.
flying so many hours from Mumbai, and probably leaving in the middle of the night, but arriving in London, and she looked as though she was just so fresh and full of love and shining. And I
Yeah.
was just, just completely melting. She was just accepting everybody's flower, and "How are you? How are you?" And very happy to see everybody at the airport. So these were precious moments when you have that chance to be with mother. And of course, on India tour, we had pujas and we had time with mother. There was a famous talk that she gave on the Nera River, which was Pandapur, and she talked about, Shivatri. This is like this very. I mean, you should listen to that talk. It was amazing. But I remember being so sick.
Mm.
And that talk, I was sitting up the back of the Pendle, and the talk was so powerful. I forgot about my body. I was just completely in bliss, and I was just floating again. So I thought, oh, wow, such a powerful experience. That was probably the highlight for me at the on the India tour. And then we saw mother again. That was great to see her again. And then it was a process. I was just staying in Brighton for a while, and then I moved to London. Stayed in London. I was in an ashram, just sort of thinking I'll go up to Scotland. We were pretty sort of
Mm.
free with another yogi. We were thinking of going
Which
Australian yogi, going up
which
to.
ashram? Which ashram were you in?
It was a small ashram. I think it was in Camden. It wasn't
Oh,
Shostrom, but it was
no, no.
another smaller one, an annex sort of like, and Fergie was staying there. So he said, I'll come and stay. So we went to stay there. And then we were walking out. We were ready to go up to Scotland, and Fergie was taking us to the station and telling us where we need to go to catch a train up to Scotland. And the phone rang just as we were leaving, and Fergie ran back in and answered it. And it was somebody from Brompton Square asking, "Are there any people that want to come and help? Do some work at Brompton Square?" So he said, "Just a minute," and he came out and he said, "Do you want to go to Brompton Square to Mother's house instead of Scotland today?" And we said, "Sure." We just took our bags back and dropped them off, and then we went straight over to Brompton Square, and it was quite cool. It was February. It was cold,
Oh,
and
cold. Yeah.
I remember coming, walking from the tube I think it was South Kensington Station, and walked to Brompton Square. It was a little chilly, and then we walked down. In Brompton Square was a Georgian terrace, and it had like 5 floors, and then the road level there was a basement, so there was stairs going down to a basement level where the servants and the dining room was down at the bottom. So we came down those stairs and we walked inside to the basement level, and it was like it was so warm going into this room, and it was like the vibrations just hit you, like you were just in blissful state immediately as you walked in. And then it was so warm, it's like going back to India. Like the feeling was like I'm back in India. And we sat down in the first room. There was a servant's room. We sat down there and we just meditated. We sort of completely blissed out. And then somebody came down. They found out that we were there, and they came down and said to us, you know, come up. You're not here to meditate. You're here to do some work. So we had to sort of gather ourselves and go and do the work. And we were sort of kind of moving stuff and moving furniture and doing odds and things, just shifting things here and cleaning things and doing general sort of housework, cleaning and stuff.
So
And then
Alex, so
yeah,
at this point, the house had been finished in, like, mother was living in the house and the
mother
building
was
work
living in
was
the house.
done. And the
Yeah, so
building work
so
was done.
building work had finished, and what it was I think mother was trying to prepare it. She wanted to sell the place, and that was basically her plan to sort of from the square. She wanted to sell the place,
So
and
she'd been there a while then. If this was 83 or 84. This is
84,
84.
84.
84. How
So
long did she stay there
so
then?
she must have been there because she moved in 81. So she'd actually been living there 3 years.
3 years,
Yeah.
yeah. But during that time, it was, completely renovated, and basically it really just, I guess, completed and finished the renovations. But then there was like fine tuning the decorations, and this is what we were doing. We're kind of like, deciding what she wanted to do with the, final finishes and things like that. So it was all the major stuff had been done. Like she would change some wallpaper and maybe doing some gold leafing, and this is where we had people like Antonio Shallow who was doing all the gold leafing. You know, it was just everything was gold. And mother wanted, okay, all these wood carvings, you want gold on it. You know, the stair banister,
Why
all
was
gold.
gold? Any particular reason that Shrimataji talked to you about?
Well, she said the vibrations, you know, the gold is very, you know, obviously an auspicious metal,
Mm.
and this creates the vibration, you know.
And were you living in the house at the time of the video?
Yes, I mean, yeah, I've been staying there. What happened was after we did this first encounter, I'll tell you the story of how it happened. So we were, you know, moving the furniture, and then in the afternoon, it was sort of in the morning, mid-morning, and we were sort of, you know, doing all the work we'd finished, and then Shamataji invited us up for tea, you know. So the first time, it's really, you know, the first time I'd really sat very close to mother, and the first interactions I'd had with her, you know, directly, you know, I hadn't really had much chance to sort of have these interactions in India. But we were sort of on the floor. There was a table, and mother was sitting on a settee, and she had, you know, tea sets, and she had coffee, and she had tea, and she was saying, you know, to everyone, would you like tea or coffee? And she looked at me, and she said, would you like tea or coffee? No, you better have tea. Your liver's, you know, your liver's not good. So she gave me tea, and she said, you need more sugar. And so she was telling me that, you know, I should go on a liver diet. So that was the first thing, the first time. And then she asked me what I was doing. And at the time, what the plan for me was, my Iraqi sister had moved to Germany, and she was, you know, in the ashram, the first ashram in Munich. And she'd suggested, she was living in Australia. She was married to an Australian, but she was German. And then she moved over to back to Germany to help with Sahaj, starting in Germany. And then when I said to her, Shamataji, I was sort of feeling, you know, I saying, Mother, I'm going over to Munich, Germany, to help start Sahaj there. And she just shook her head and said, no, no, no. Germany is a horrible place, horrible vibration. So many people died there. It's a very heavy place. She said, you better stay here. And when she said stay here, I thought she meant London. And then afterwards, the leader at the time, Gavin Brown, came out to me and said, he said, you must have done something good in the past life. You must have good punyas, because mother's asked you to stay in her house. And I said, really? I thought she said stay in London. No, no, no. She wants you to come and move into the house. So that
Okay.
was a real shock for me, because when I had realization, I felt that I'd been serving mother before, and I had this connection that I'd been with mother, and which she confirmed later, that she said I've served her in many lives, and many times I've come back to serve her. So I had this feeling, and here I was living in, you know, invited to stay with her, and then my whole day was serving mother. So it was something that I had a desire, and the mother obviously fulfilled that desire. But it was a very special time, and it was completely surprise for me. And then after I realized, looking back on it, was she was preparing me for, you know, what I was going to do later on, which I'll touch on later.
So what was your day like with Shrimataji, living with her at Brompton Square, please?
So it was like living in an ashram, because she said the first night I stayed there, I was, you know, I guess I'd been, you know, because I've been sick, and I've been recovering. I slept in, you know, and I slept in till 8 o'clock, which was, you know, normally unheard of for a yogi to sleep so late. And then I came down, and I came down, and mother had been up already. And then she said to me, did you sleep well? And I had such a good sleep. I felt so energized. And I said, Shamaraji, I had such a good sleep. And she said, that's good. But she said, when you're with me, you need to get up at 4 o'clock and meditate. And I said, put my ears, says, yes, Shamaraji, I'm sorry I slept in. She said, no, 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 you needed to rest. You said you needed the rest. It's good. But, you know, tomorrow you need to get up at 4. So we got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You know, Antonio was staying with us as well, Antonio Shallow. So we just got up and meditated together at 4 o'clock. And then, you know, Shambhanaji would wake up early as well. So she was up by 4 or 5. And then we'd bring her tea in the morning. I'd make tea, take it to her for morning tea, and then I'd make the breakfast. So usually I'd make whatever mother wanted for breakfast.
What was
And
the usual breakfast, please?
the usual breakfast, she was on a protein diet.
Mm.
So it consisted of egg whites, ham, sometimes frankfurters, and cheese. So it was like there's no carbs or anything, so it's a pure protein diet. So she was taking that every morning for breakfast, and that was the usual thing. And then after that, she would invite me. I bring the breakfast, and then I'd sit down, and she'd be talking about what we were planning for the day. And then she said, "Well, I need to go to buy, sometimes it was to go to the flower market, or to go to buy to the hardware shop to buy some wallpaper, or various things. Sometimes she had to do banking, and so it was whatever mother wanted in that day. And sometimes we'd go shopping for food, and she'd go Indian shopping in Southall. She'd buy all the Indian food, and so there was some. Every day was different, and then there'd be some guests coming, or she had some diplomatic function, and then she'd be preparing for that.
Because essentially, CP was in London as a diplomat, and she was serving the Maya function of being the diplomat's wife, and a lot of hosting, a lot of hosting,
a lot of people coming and going, and then a lot of yogis coming and going, a lot of calls from all over the world, and it was like the center of the universe. Could imagine the whole of Sahaj Yoga was coming into, like, from different countries. There were people reporting, on what's going on. There were people arriving, lots of different people were coming and going, and from India and from other places. So she would be receiving people. And then there was diplomatics. She'd be having, like a tea party for the diplomats' wives. And then, she'd be, very sweetly so many different roles that she played. So she was the diplomat's wife. She was Mrs. Srivastava, doing the domestic stuff. And then she was the Adi Shakti, So you just see these roles changing, from day to day. And then I always have to remind myself she's the goddess, she's the Adi Shakti, because she's very motherly and make you feel very comfortable. And sometimes you can get fall into the mire and then become more familiar, and you just have to pull yourself back, and you've got to sort of realize that she's the Adi Shakti. But I was always very natural around her. I was never scared. I was never sort of nervous, because some other people were always very nervous and very kind of reserved, and not, because they're conscious of I don't know, making a mistake or something like that in front of mother, protocol. And I was more sort of, I just had this natural feeling, and a sense that what to do, what I shouldn't do. I guess it was, an innate protocol that was there. And I try to always, remind myself, she's the Adi Shakti, she's a goddess. And in the meditations, I just, pray. And then she told me the deities are watching, the deities are always watching you, to make sure that you're doing, you're not, stepping the boundaries, or, overstepping the protocol or anything. So that was always a mindful thing. The deity is always watching what you're doing. So you have to be extremely aware of, in the goddess's house. You can't be doing things, joking around. Even though we had a lot of interesting times doing decoration work and working hard. It was really an interesting time, to be with mother at that particular time. There's so much going on.
It's a very interesting thing that you've just mentioned about being in Shrimatiji's house, and now Shrimatiji is in our hearts, in our homes. And so it's kind of, the importance of realizing that we are in her presence all the time, and observing, shall we say, the protocols, isn't it? It's just a way of life now, isn't it? A lot
It
of
is.
It's moved on to the subtle level that before it was we were physically in mother's presence and made to be aware of how we should be in mother's physical presence. But as you say, now mother is everywhere inside. But if we can maintain that sense of I am still in the presence of mother, of Shrimadaji, of the Adi Shakti, then that's such a sweet thing, because then it informs our behavior and helps keep our attention there, because can be such a challenge nowadays with the
Yes.
Maya. Yeah, that's really sweet.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
I felt that, Alex, what you were saying, that
mm,
it's such a different feeling when you're in one of mother's house,
yeah.
because we talk about, oh, the vibrations were very strong and the vibrations felt like this. But when I went a couple of times, but I went to visit her in Victoria Gardens, and I remember walking through that front door, and suddenly I felt like I was in the womb again, like this. You feel this incredible thickness and bubble of vibrations all around you, this energy, but it's this comforting, um,
Soothing.
protective, soothing. Yeah. And it's different from being in the puja. It was very different from being in a puja. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the intensity is amazing. The vibrations are so strong, and I could never think, right? It was like it's hard. I mean, if you're in a deep state of meditation and you're feeling that, Kundalini blasting, your Saraswara is open, that's the way you feel all the time. Like, from day to day, you're just you're just completely blissed out. And I didn't have a lot of thoughts. People said, did you ask mother anything? And I said, I didn't have any thoughts in my mind. There wasn't any sort of cognition about what to ask mother,
No
because
questions.
there was no questions. They were just in
Yeah.
this state of bliss.
And
So it's
completely in the
something to
present
enjoy.
moment. Completely in the
Exactly.
present moment. Yeah.
And then when you're doing something, you're just, following mother. So it was interesting because, I started doing helping, do the breakfast, and, we kind of had various things we were doing. Like I was doing all the cleaning, and like the day was full with, housework and doing stuff. And then there was sometimes, some of the tradesmen were coming in to fix things. And one day there was, we discovered that, there was rising damp, and a rising damp is a big problem in a lot of houses in the UK because it rises up the wall, and then the wall can go moldy, the wallpaper can peel off, and a lot of problems with rising damp. So what we discovered was that there was some water leakage somewhere. We didn't know where it was. It was going up the walls, and we pressed the damp meter into the walls where the plaster was, and the damp meter was really high, like, so the walls were saturated, and then some of the wallpaper was peeling off. And this went from the ground floor up to the second floor. So it had, capillary action of the plaster would draw water all the way up to the second floor. And then we were trying to find, where the leak was. So we were walking, mother said it's coming from the basement. So we went down to the basement because the roof had been checked and there wasn't anything from the roof. It wasn't coming down, it was coming up. And then mother said it's coming down from the basement. So mother was walking along with her hands towards the floor. And then she said, it's here. This is where the water's leaking. And then Pat Anslow, who was doing the helping, lifted the tile up, and there was sort of a screed, and then he dug that out, and then there was a copper pipe because there was copper pipes under the heating, like heating pipes under the floor. And then we discovered that it was a broken, like a split pipe, which had been obviously damaged when they filled it in at some stage. It had been broken and leaking since for a long, long time, and this is why the walls were damp. So she found the leak, and then he was able to fix that, and then we had people coming, and she had to dry the place out. So we had these big dehumidifiers and fans and trying to dry the place out. So it was really amazing how mother just, and then the water, if you put the damp meter in, it was, still very high. And then she said, no, I'll have to fix this. So she gave it vibrations, gave the wall vibrations. And then when the damp meter went in, it just went up a little bit. So she'd moved the water from that area of the wall. And then she did it around the other places. And then the damp meter was showing that all the water had gone.
Amazing.
So with vibrations, and she was always saying, check your vibrations. What do you feel on vibrations? So every day it was like you're introspecting, feeling your vibrations. She kept telling you, now what do you feel? So I kind of I cleared out a lot. I was just completely, clear because I've been with mother every day. So if somebody walked in the basement, they came to visit, I immediately felt that all their catches, and I could have been on the second floor or in mother's room or anywhere in the house, and I'd immediately feel whatever problems the person had, the catches. And then one day she said, I felt my Agya just go bang, and then she said, so and so's come, your Agya's catching, so go and tell her to clear the Agya. So so every time someone would come, there'd be, she'd say, go and tell them to do this or that. So there were a couple of yogis that came over. Mother said their Swadhisthana and void is horrible. She said, go and tell them to do mudka treatment. So I had to send them away because they were quite caught up. So every time, there's all these people sort of flowing through. So a lot of people wanted to come and see mother. So I have to kind of, be alert about, what was going on with their vibrations before I allow them to come and see mother.
You,
And
you
I
were the
guess
gatekeeper. You were
yeah,
like
I
the
was a
gatekeeper.
gatekeeper in a sense. And then unless mother had requested them, if she requested them, then of course they would come and see her. But sometimes people would randomly turn up, and you'd have to sort of, tell them, you just can't turn up here. It's a protocol to it. And sometimes mother would see them, so depending on how busy she was and how, if it was important to see them. But oftentimes she was always sort of, making sure that, the vibration, she would say, okay, go and tell them to do this and that. She would put attention on them and then, give me instructions to tell them what to do, to clear on the vibrational level. So that was always I guess the flow of things. People would come and go. Then we get calls from all different times of the night. Phone would ring and someone would be calling from America, someone calling from Australia, someone calling from Middle East, so there were just all the time this constant sort of, movement of, attention and focus from different parts of the world. And, someone say, oh, I'm calling from such and such a place, can you tell Shrimataji my father's had a heart attack or something, someone from India calls up, my father's had a heart attack, and I said, yes, and can I speak to Shrimataji? And I said, no, not at the moment, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, So oftentimes you'd have to be, taking all these calls from random people calling up, and sometimes mad people would ring up, and in the middle of the night they ring up and say, can I speak to Shrimataji? And they got very angry when you said, no, you can't, it's in the middle of the night, But anyway, Shimadaji was, I'd often relay the messages, of course, whatever people, I got a call from so-and-so, and she said, well, and their father's having heart attack or something. She said, well, heart problems. And she said, I will give them abundance. So she gave them abundance. She said, why are they calling me of these things? They can do it themselves. They, they have the power. They have all my powers. They can work on themselves. So sometimes she would be a little bit upset with the yogis for not assuming their powers, because she said, everyone has the powers. Why don't they use them? She said, all the healing powers are there from yogis, and they always wanted mother to do it, and it was like I would say, you're learning all the subtleties of, the goddess and how the goddess works, and this like a flow of different things happening, and it really felt like a cosmic kind of dance, like things are moving, lots of Sahaj work has been happening all over the world, and mother's put attention on so many things. And then there was world things that mother was putting her attention on. And I remember she was always looking at the news, always keeping up to date with what's going on in the world. So she had her attention on all the things which were happening at that time, So it was quite an interesting period in history.
Because she would ask when she would go to other countries, she would always ask to see the local newspapers to see what was going on, and she would watch the TV, and I'm sure she had TV, because there were, didn't she?
Yeah, she was watching the news, keeping up to date with what's going on. And one of the things that she'd often do is, she would basically, like Wimbledon. We watched Wimbledon together. She really enjoyed the tennis or the cricket. She would watch that, and then she was watching Borg and McEnroe that was in the 80s. So Borg and McEnroe was sort of coming up, and he was still he's sort of shouting, come on, John, come on, John. And she said, he's a realized soul, he's speaking in the third person, and then Bjorn Borg was another realized soul. She said, look, the two realized souls playing, she said the younger one is more, more sort of, I guess, impatient. And she said the older one is very calm and cool. If you ever watch Bjorn
Yeah.
Borg play, just incredibly collected and just didn't show any emotion, just completely sort of meditative in a way. She said, see the difference, but she really enjoyed it. She said she always enjoys these, matches and sort of watching them play. And then sometimes she'd watch a, Hindi movie or something like that, So we had the family over. Every year they come to stay with her. So Sudden Didi and Rommel and the two children came across. So I was kind of babysitting at one stage, playing cricket with Anand, and
So this is this is mother's grandson. So
yeah,
the
mother's
grandchildren.
grandson, yeah, the
Yeah.
grandchildren. So it was very, like if it's sort of you feel like part of the family you're playing, and they make you feel very, like
Yeah.
I guess I'm serving them, looking after them. So, we became very close, in those days. And then Kalpana came as well with her children. And it was always, you're kind of observing and not sort of, you have to be not too familiar, but, you're there for serving and looking after. So you have to always maintain that sort of relationship, even though they're very welcoming and making you feel, part of the family, but you have to remind yourself, and we all enjoyed, the time we had, because there was always something to do. One time we were trying to, mother said we need to change the wallpaper, so we went out to a shop that sells wallpaper that mother knew, and then there was all these sale on wallpaper. Like, normally wallpaper is quite expensive, so they had this sale on this wall. Every time we went to a shop, there was a sale on. So mother got all these rolls of wallpaper, and they were, there was, 6 or 7 rolls of wallpaper. And John Watkins was saying, I don't know if that's going to be enough. She said, it'll be fine, So we got the wallpaper, and then when we did the wallpapering, it was exactly the right amount. It's
Wow.
just like, and then sometimes, there was a patch that, was a difficult area, different angles,
Yes.
and which John was trying to fit it there, and mother was, supervising me. She was saying, turn it this way, turn it that way, and John was convinced it was too small, or it wasn't going to fit. And then mother said, okay, move it that way and put it up. So, and then it fitted perfectly. So little things like that, you have your idea of, what should work and what should not, but then when the goddess is telling you've got to do it. You don't question it's going to work, it's going to fit, And then one I remember a very, very funny story. We were
Yes.
all redoing, a section down the stairs to the lower basement level, and it was all, she wanted to change the wallpaper in that whole section going down. So she'd picked out, and we had some wallpaper there. It was a red color. So we stayed up, we were working, and when you're sort of in this thoughtless state of awareness, and you don't feel tired, you just keep working, and I think it was John, me, and Antonio, and maybe somebody else, and we were saying, oh, what's the time? Oh, it's midnight. Well, we better have a cup of tea, So, so, so we worked all night, and we were really proud of ourselves. We finished, and then mother came down, and we thought, oh, we kind of finished the whole job. It was all done, ready to go. And then she looked at it and said, but you finished it. She says, oh, you did, you finished it. And she looked at it and she said, but the wallpaper is around the wrong way. And then and then we looked at it, and it was a wallpaper that could have gone either way. But when mother said it was round the wrong way, then it was, it was around the wrong way. So we had to take it all off and change it. And then she said, actually, there's another wallpaper that I want to get. So we went to the shop and got the wallpaper, and then we ended up putting that wallpaper up, and it looked even better. So it was like, we made these mistakes, but then they turned out to be, quite interesting.
Yeah.
Mother, subtly didn't want to, put that there and change that. So it was quite interesting.
And please, can we have some miracle stories shopping
Certainly.
stories and laughing stories, because from what other yogis, John Watkinson, Pat, Alan, Lewis, and so many others, they remember Danya. There's always moments where Shamathji makes it just such a light atmosphere, although there is such intense work going on, not just on a vibrational level. So if you'd please share with us those moments, that would be awesome.
Sure.
Um,
So I think when Mother was preparing the house, there was always a lot of things going on. So little miracles around, like Mother getting the wallpaper and all this sort of stuff. I mean, it's simple things, but then you look at it and it's just like miraculous how this just works out. Everything just worked out with the rising damp and the problems she had with the rising damp and just giving vibrations around that. So these are again more. This is a tapestry. I think this was or painting in reception area. I think. But anyway, the we'd always have these moments of humor. Mother had bought. She went out and she bought sort of jackets for everybody and suits. So we had. She had everybody that had been helping. So there was a group of us there, and Pat Anslow was there, and Chris Marlowe was there. If you know Chris and Pat's sort of rounder and shorter, and Chris is very tall, Chris Marlowe.
yeah.
So we were in Mother's bedroom, and she said, I've got some suits for you." And then she gave one to Pat, and she gave one to Chris Marlowe. And she said, go and try them on, go and try them on. So she was sort of really keen for them to come and try them on. So Chris came down. I think Chris was first, and the suit was way too small. Like you know, the trousers were sort of, about maybe, 20 centimeters from his ankles. They were up very high on his legs, so there was way too small, and the jacket was too short. So he came over to and Shimon said, "Now how is it? How is it?" And being English, he's saying, "Oh, it's fine, mother. It's fine, mother. You're very polite." And then Pat came over, and Pat's suit was way too big, and then he was doing the same. Oh, it's fine, mother. It's fine, and mother was just laughing. We were all laughing and laughing. And then she said, "It isn't a bit too big." "Oh, it's okay, mother. It's not. It's all right. And it'll be fine, mother." And she's just laughing and laughing. She said, "Now you swap with Chris, Pat. You swap with Chris, and then come and show me." And then so both of them, swapped suits, and then they came back, and everything was fitting perfectly. And we're just roaring with laughter because it was just such a funny situation. And then she said, "Mother," she said, "See the English, they're too polite. They're too polite. They'll never say anything. She said, "Look at that. And she was laughing and saying they were too polite. They just wouldn't say anything. So this is the dining room.
Mm.
This is the all the marble work that was done sort of on the floors, and underneath that was this coil pipes, copper pipes and heating. And
Uh-huh.
this is where along one of those sections a bit further back in the corridor is where the pipe had burst, or it had a little sort of crack in it, so it was just seeping out over time. And this is the wallpaper again, this sort of
Yeah.
mother's particular style of wallpaper she wanted. So every room has a theme. Everything was different about it. So it was really amazing how much sort of variety there was in the decoration of the whole house. And different, like there was a there was a carpet, and the room she called it the jade room. So there was like a lot of jade and green, Chinese sort of Oriental Chinese sort of decoration, and there was a carpet which was sort of green. And
Mhm.
she said, "This carpet is made by a realized soul." And she put her hands to the carpet, and the whole carpet color just intensified. And she
Yeah.
said, "See, it had response to vibrations, more, the same when she walked across the carpet." But she said, "This one is even more intense." So just put her hands towards it, and then the colors just became more vibrant. And these are the sort of little things. And then at the end of the stair banister in the house, there was a Dalek player, like a boy playing the Dalek.
Mm.
And she walked past it and she said, "This isn't correct anatomically." So that it was quite a quite a an awkward way that they'd sculpted the scapula and the shoulders, and the boys sort of it wasn't quite correct. So mother said, "I need to change that." So she started giving vibrations to this sculpture, and I was standing up the top. Up a few stairs up, and I was looking down so I could see it very clearly. And there was a yogi at the sort of a few stairs down looking up. And then I could see what was happening. And it was like the wood was becoming like plastic. And mother was sort of carving it with vibrations. And then I could see the shape of the sculpture changing. And she said, "Do you see that? Do you see that?" I said, "Shumaraji, it's a miracle." She said, "See, the vibrations can change matter." She said, "You
Mm.
have to understand that this is the source of everything. The vibrations are at the source, so they can change the matter at the atomic level." So she's giving vibrations and showing us how this was. And the yogi below was looking up, and he's a French guy who was doing the gold leaf work in the house, and he's watching it, and I could see. I wasn't sure if he actually saw it, but he was just saying, yes, mother," like, you know, kind of, humoring mother, or sort of saying, yes, yes, because mother's asking, "Did you see it?" He said, "Yes, mother, yes, mother." And then all of a sudden he saw it, and then he just went, yes, mother, I see it, I see it. He got so excited because he actually saw what was happening.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was this amazing sort of sculpting that mother was doing on this wood. And I thought, wow, I said, "Mother, this is amazing miracles." She said, "No, no, it's just normal for me. For you, it's a miracle. For me, it's normal," because she said vibrations can penetrate matter, they can change matter. So this is what we have to understand as yogis. We have this
Mm.
tremendous power of vibrations. She said it's at the source. It's the source of, the universe. It's the source of God's power and God's love. So we have to, cherish them and use them, in a positive, constructive way. So we have to, she said it's so much more than the matter, because we're sort of beyond the matter in a way. And that's the vibrational frequency that just is much higher and ethereal. So it's a much more powerful force, penetrates into the matter and can change the molecular structure. She said water is like, can hold vibrations. So she said water is the best for treating any problems. She's vibrated water because it penetrates into the cells. So a lot of the problems with cancers and all these sorts of things of the body, you've got to treat it with vibrated water. And particularly when we grow things, grow food, we need to use vibrations to grow all the vegetables and fruits. If we can grow them ourselves, it's really powerful, because it's going to change the vibrational. It's the angle of the hydrogen and oxygen, the angle of the I would say the atomic angle, so they can absorb into the cells. As Mother was saying, the vibrations change all that. They make it easier for the water to be absorbed into your cells. So that was an amazing sort of miracles that happened. And then we have a lot of enjoyment, a lot of laughter. Mother's always very light. You always felt very light, and there's always funny people you'd see, and Mother's just like, "Look at that fellow," and she'd burst out laughing. What a sort of thing. And one day I was probably you know fairly new to London. It was sort of early on in the time, and I just had just a sports jacket. I didn't have any. Everyone was wearing suits. And I was thinking, I've got to go out and buy a suit, because I was only a student. I didn't have a lot of money, so I thought I better go find somewhere to have a suit. Then one day, Mother said to me, "So bring the car at 10 o'clock. We're going to do some shopping." So I brought the car, and I was driving the car, and not being, from London and not really knowing London that well, Mother was, she managed, because Antonio had to work, so he sort of said, "You need to drive Mother now." And so I have, Mother said, "Don't worry, I'll tell you where to go." So, I was just sort of getting directed by Shimanaji, "Turn left here, turn right here." I was just driving, Mother knew that where she was going, so I was kind of like, fairly naive in terms of knowing what London. I just sort of following what Mother's instructions were, which was pretty easy. So we went to East the East End, from Brompton Square to East End. So we got there, parked the car, and I opened the door for mother. She got out. We walked down the road a little bit, and there was a tailor shop. So we went into the tailor shop, and there was obviously the tailor knew her. And she said, "Hello, Mrs. Srivastava," really Cockney sort of, "What can I do for you today?" And she said, "I want to buy a suit for this gentleman, this boy, And I said, "Shumanaji," I pulled my ears, I said, "Oh, no, Shumanaji, let me buy the suit." She said, "No, no, no, I'm your mother." And she said, "That's what you wanted. You wanted a suit." And because I've been, desiring a suit, thinking I've got to, so she bought me a suit, and and then a thought came into my mind, "Oh, I need a shirt." And she said, "And a shirt." And then and the tie was there in my mind. She said, "And a tie." So every time I'd think of something, she would say a tie, a shirt, And then I was sort of thinking, I was about to think about shoes, and I said, in my mind, I said, "Shimani, you let me buy my shoes at least, And she didn't say anything. But she knew exactly what's going on in your mind. That's why it was sort of like you have to be in thoughtlessness, because she could read your mind. She knows exactly what's going on in the mind. Every time you have a desire, she will fulfill it. So I had a desire for a suit, she gave me a suit. So it was really a special time. And then I put the suit on, and I felt so joyful because mother had bought me this suit, and I was driving I felt like I'm her chauffeur. I had to look the part. But
You must
a
cherish
couple
that.
of funny, sorry.
Must cherish that suit.
Yeah, I still got it. I can't. I've got it. It's like I can't fit into it. It's too small for me now. But but I've got it there as a memento. And then another funny story happened. Um, so I drove mother to get some. I think we went to Sainsbury's or one of the department stores. She's looking for getting some overcoats for her grandkids. So she's trying to find woolen and cotton, and she said, "I go into these department stores and they've only got plastic, all the nylon, and she said they don't have cotton and natural fibers anymore. They've got all these synthetic fibers." And she said it's going to create so many problems. This plastic is going everywhere. She said in the future there'll be a big problem with plastics. And now we've got all these problems with plastics, microplastics everywhere from those fibers that break off in the wash, and they go into the sea, and then the marine life gets caught up with the plastics. She said it's going to create so many problems in the future. And so she was looking around for, natural fibers and stuff. So anyway, we did the shopping, and then we went back. And when I'm driving back to South Kensington, Brompton Square, and we ended up in North Kensington. And I don't know how it happened, but somehow I went the opposite direction. And then we were driving around, and I was completely lost, and I couldn't work out what had happened. How did that happen? Because I knew the way. By that stage, I had sort of like an idea of, where I was going and around London. So I kind of knew the way, but all of a sudden I'm in, she said, "Go and ask somebody." And I asked somebody, and they said, "Oh, you're in North Kensington." So I came back. And I said to mother, "We're in North Kensington." She said, "North Kensington? Why are we in North Kensington for?" And we're driving around. She said, "You must find the way back." And then so we're driving around North Kensington. She was sort of talking. She said, "Well, maybe I'm here to vibrate this area." And then after a while, she said, "Now I know what happened." She said, "The deities played a trick on you because they didn't want me, because she had a diplomatic function to go to, right? And she said the deities knew that she didn't want to go. So they played a trick on me. So I got lost. So she had an excuse. And then by the time we got back, it was too late because CP had to go. He had to go on this, for this function. When he came back, he was really upset. He was extremely upset with, angry. And and then, and she said, "This fellow got completely lost. I don't know what happened to him. He just, we ended up in North Kensington. Can you believe it? This fellow just took me to North Kensington." So the next day, I mean, I heard mother say this, and I went up to CP and I said, "Sir, I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry because I got completely lost." And, "Oh, no, 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 it's okay." And mother was standing behind going, sort of smiling, and, I said, "It's all my fault." So I sort of try to diffuse the situation a little bit, but there was always this, this sort of, balancing act that mother was doing between, the wife of Sir CP, as a diplomat's wife, all the functions she's got to attend. She said, I hate these functions. These people are just horrible people. You have to shake hands with them, the horrible vibrations. They're having affairs with people, they're taking drugs, they're doing this. She said, they're just awful people. So I don't want to have anything they're immoral. She was sort of telling me about all this immorality of the diplomatic community. I mean, they're all sort of, very immoral people. So sometimes, so she said, I shake hands with these people, and then they sit you next to some horrible person, and you've got to spend that, at the evening sort of making small talk, and she said, I really don't enjoy it at all. So
Yeah.
these are the things she had to sort of do every day, and then running Sahaj Yoga and going to, running tours and programs and all these things we did. And she had a private secretary, was Patty Prohl, who recently passed away, which is very sad. We had a lot of time together, and we went to America with Patty, and it was very special time, you know, being with mother, and we were just sort of enjoying every minute that we had, the times that we share
Yeah.
with mother. And it was a special times. And then David Prohl was
Yeah.
helping to sell Brompton Square. So he was, coming every day and talking to mother, what the progress was, what buyers he was able to line up. And we had, one very interesting where we were cleaning and finishing off some work. And then, the doorbell rang, and there were the people coming to see. David was bringing these, potential buyers through the house. And all of us were running down the stairs, and Shamaji, she came running down with us. We all snuck out the servants' door. So Shamaji came up the other side to get out of the house before the potential buyers came through. So it was so funny. We were all laughing and going up there, walking out of the servants' quarters, which was on the ground floor, and there was up to the ground level. So it was actually basement level. It's below the ground, the road, so it was off the pavement. So mother's running with us up the stairs. So did they see us? So lots of very very sort of comical situations we had, in those days, with mother, and but always joyful, always so much laughing, and she's just joy. You just felt a lot of joy being in that situation. And then another really nice story was, again, I'd been, getting more confident to drive, and poor Antonio was working, and every so often he'd have to disappear to work in his business. So he's got, he's doing restorations and picture frames and stuff. So he was very busy. He'd disappear for a weekend, work the whole weekend, then come back, and then be there for mother. So these sort of alternating times, so I'd have to fill in the gaps when he wasn't around to drive mother, because he was driving mother mostly before. So then I, tried to, mother said, now tomorrow we're going to Southall. So I had to, this A to Z, this little sort of paperback book about this big, I had to go through, and it's like, turn to page, 30, and you're in page 12, and you got to go here, and then, oh, here, and then go, it's all over the place. So to sort of try and figure out where to go. So I was trying to memorize the route because I didn't want to get lost. And at that stage, I thought, I should be knowing how to get somewhere, like mother, I shouldn't have to bother mother sort of to find and direct it, let her to relax, and then I'll just drive. So anyway, I set off on the journey, and I'm trying to memorize, okay, I've got to turn at this street, roundabout, church, I sort of memorize all the landmarks. I'm driving, all the way. We got to South Holden, and then we did some shopping. And during the trip, mother was silent, so I was just sort of trying to remember things, and it was like my brain was sort of, trying to remember this route, all the places which we were passing, the landmarks, the roads, the road names. So so we got there, and it seemed to take ages, like it seemed to take hours, like getting out to Southall from where we were at Brompton Square. So we arrived, and then there was this. It was very hard to get parking, so I managed to find a parking spot. and just down the road a little bit there were these witches' hats outside of a house, and then this car of young Indian boys came, and they had the sort of the bhangra dancing going, and the sort of the sound system up high. Then a couple of guys got out of the car, and they moved the witch's hat, and this English guy came running out, the older English guy came running out and screaming at them and saying, "Oi, don't move them. This is for my son. He's coming. You can't. This is his spot. And these Indian boys
Oh,
are
the
saying,
bollards.
yeah, those witches' hats
Yeah,
they
the
have,
traffic bollards. Yeah.
and they're saying, look, you don't own the road, mister. This is public road. You can't reserve anything. And
Yeah.
he's saying, you Indians, you come here, you take our jobs, you do this, you do that. So he's just a tirade of abuse to these
Yeah.
young boys. And the three of there's three of those. They all stood, above him. They're quite, strong young boys, young men. And then this guy was, he saw that he was completely outnumbered, and he sort of retreated back and whinged and screamed. And then Shivaji was saying, "Look at this fellow." The British come to take over India for 500 years. They raped and pillaged the whole place. They took all the jewels out, all the wealth of India,
Okay.
and then we graciously let them go. We didn't complain. And
Yeah.
Indians come to this country. She said they work hard, they
Yeah.
they have businesses, and they do well. The children get educated. The parents work hard to put the children through the schools. She said they become accountants, they become lawyers, they become doctors. She said she said, and these English, they're so lazy, they want to be on the dole. They don't want to work hard. So she's saying, look at them, look at the way they behave. So this was the theme of racism, that mother was, that whole talk, and then there's a theme that kind of ran through this whole day. And we went shopping in Southall. I went to the butcher's, and then the butcher was making some comments in Hindi about me. And she muttered, she said, no,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
he's Australian. He's
Yeah.
Australian.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was kind of like, she was quite poignant about the comments about the
Yeah.
Indians and the
Yeah.
English. So
Yeah.
on the way back, she was telling me about how that the English, through their expansionists and this ego that made them sort of so aggressive in the world. She said it really um, created a big imbalance in the world with this right-sided aggression. She said they'll pay for it over time. So this is
Yeah.
said now these lands, peoples of those lands are coming to live in England. So she said that'll change the dynamic of the place a lot. And she was saying, can you believe they tortured me? They actually tortured. So she's telling me about this, what they did to her in India. And she said we had to be liberated in order to have spirituality. So this was, I was just totally absorbed in the conversation. And we drove back. Didn't seem to take too long. And we arrived back at Brompton Square, and I just thought, wow, I didn't remember anything. I just drove, and I was just completely on. I didn't know where I was going. I was just driving, and then mother said, she sort of paused for a minute, and she was in meditation, and then she said to me, she said, "Oh, it's interesting. It didn't take very long to come back." And I said, "Yes, Shamataji, it didn't take long at all." And she said, she said, "I watched you on the way there." She said, "Your mind was full. You were worried about, getting lost, and you were memorizing the route." And she narrated my thought patterns. You saw a church there, you saw a roundabout here, and she sort of went through it. And it was like she was reading every thought that was going on in my mind all the way to Southall. And she said, on the way back, you were completely thoughtless. You were in blissful state. Your focus was on me. And she said it didn't take any time at all, because she said time is an illusion.
Wow.
And I just went, wow, but she demonstrated it. She said, see, your mind plays, your mind creates this idea of time, and this, it's all an illusion. And then she said, it can stand still, and she can stop and start time. She said, this is how it works, you know.
Brilliant.
So she said, in the state of thoughtlessness is basically, it's timeless. So this was very profound, and I just was completely blown away by this experience. And when you meditate on it, you sort of feel the vibrations. It's really just so powerful when mother gives you those realization in terms of what's happening reality. What we think is reality is an illusion. So this is all part of the training, and that basically led me to sort of all of the understanding, the deeper understanding of vibrations, how things work with, or you're just a witness to this play of life, and the more you get involved in it, the more drama you have. So it was quite interesting because it was the only way you can survive when you're with Shamaji is being completely surrendered in a witness state. Because I saw people come and go, which were just they have ego and they think too much, and then you could feel it in their consciousness. They're just disturbed. And Shamaji really helped a lot of people in those days. She worked, we were at a public program. This person in a wheelchair came up, and mother gave them vibrations and healed them, and they could stand up, and they took the cripple, so
Wow.
they started walking. It
Yeah.
was a miraculous thing. So she did a lot of curing, and there was all these miracle things that happened. So we did a tour of England. So I was sort of involved, helping to do the filming in different parts because I was doing video work in those days and traveling around. So
Yes.
that was another interesting time, that we traveled all the way, this UK tour with mother in different parts and public programs she was doing, and all these miracle things happening, like curing people. And one program I remember, I was um, sitting at the back, and then she sort of looked at me and said, "Oh," she said, "Oh, the yogis need to give vibrations to the new people." So, I thought she was looking at me, so I moved down to behind somebody to help to give them vibrations. And then I started giving this guy vibrations, and and then I felt all the negativity in his guy. It just jumped on me, and I immediately had a splitting headache. I felt like vomiting. I felt like all this. And he said, "Oh, I feel amazing. This is amazing. Oh, wow." And I was sort of fallen back, and I was sitting there, and I just had to go and retreat. I was just, trying to clear myself because I was going to go back in the car with mother, and I thought, oh God, I had this migraine headache coming on, this throbbing headache. And then anyway, the program went on a long time because mother was seeing people, she was working on people at the end of the program. It like went on for hours, and I was sitting there in agony with this headache. Anyway, finally, mother had finished, and then, we left. And I was sitting in the front, Antonio was driving, I was sitting in the passenger seat, and mother was behind me, and I was sort of head was throbbing. And then all of a sudden, mother leant forward and she went whack on the back of my aggia, and I literally felt stuff drop out of my and the headache
Wow.
went. And she said, "What have you been doing?" And I said, "Oh, Shamaraji, I gave vibrations to this new person." She said, "No, no, no, no." She said, "You shouldn't give vibrations to, she says, you're too clean. You'll absorb all their negativity. So, you mustn't give vibrations at that point." She was saying, you're too clean, you'll just absorb it like a sponge. She said, "You absorb all his negativity." And then so I did, she took me back, and then she mixed up some ginger and icing sugar in a little cup, and so a little bowl, and she mixed it up with her hands, got a spoon and started putting it into my mouth. And then I
Wow.
went, the ginger, it just blew me away. My eyes were watering, nose was running. She's laughing. She said, "See, it's going to work it out."
Incredible.
So these are things. And then another time she said, I need to do some ghee up your nose. So she literally heated up some ghee, and then I brought the bowl, and then she got a spoon and started putting it up. Put your head back. And so mother's standing behind me with this spoon and putting spoonfuls of ghee up, and it's going in my nose. I'm drowning in ghee. It's going all over my eyes and in my so I'm going, That's going to help you." And then another time she gave me a head rub. That was that was pretty amazing,
What was that like?
She's got such strong hands, like she just like it felt like her fingers were going into my skull, like it was going deep down and just pulling my hair and pulling my ears, and really rough, really strong, strong, and putting the oil on. I was covered in oil, and then but afterwards my head was just like, it felt like I didn't have the top of it was just open. Sarastra was completely open, and she said, "Ah, there we go. That's better."
Head massage from the goddess. What better?
It was a very special time. And then other times, you get to rub mother's feet. That was the other special times you had when she said, can rub my feet. And then you're pressing as hard as you can. And she said, press harder, press harder. And you literally your every muscle and fiber of your body is sort of trying to put pressure. And then you feel these feet are just rock solid, She said, oh, press, or work on her Vishuddhi, or depending on press, like, sometimes you just feel it's like a rock. After a program, we have to work on, she'd often find that she's taken on all the problems of the audience, and then you've got to, take out the vibrations in certain chakras. She said what happens is that she's emitting all these vibrations and then it kind of builds up. She sucks in all the butters and negativity, and then takes a while for it to work out. So these sorts of things, you're working on her and clearing her. I mean, you're taking vibrations out of her, so she's not in pain. So, but she said, that her body is absorbing all this. She doesn't understand, you don't understand, or my body is just working all the time, 24/7. So whenever she goes to a place, she's absorbing all of the negative stuff in that place to clear the, all these souls would be coming, these dead souls. She said there's just so many hanging around, especially in Europe, like cities like Vienna, and where there's been war, there's been a lot of, in Munich and other places in Germany around, a lot of dead spirits floating around,
Yeah.
So these are sort of like, things that you kind of, insights you have of, how mother worked, and, the constant, things she sacrificed, and then pain that she's in, we've got no idea how much pain she was in, and she just, bore everything. She said it's like having a crucifixion every day, that's the sort of pain she was having, with working out all this. And then so that's why yogis around her really needed to be working on themselves and meditating and clearing themselves out, because you don't want to burden your mother, you don't want to make her be a burden for her, if you have any chakra problems or things like that. So it was very, very intense time as well. You've really got to keep yourself in good balance. So after that experience of absorbing that activity, I was a bit more careful, not to expose myself. But I was very sensitive. I was hypersensitive to vibrations when I'm walking. I look at someone, if I get catch, I get a headache. So it was like instant. So then I prayed, Mother, please make me stronger.
Sorry.
Yeah.
How did you get out of that hypersensitive state? What did you do?
I prayed to Mother to make me
That's it.
stronger. That's all I said, Mother. She said basically, if you're a little bit left-sided, you're more sensitive. So I was maybe a little bit on the left side, then I got more in the right side, and then came back in the center, and then I was okay. But it's just the process that works out. You move to the left, you move to the right, you come back to the center, or you move to the right, you come back to the center, or move to the left. Sometimes you move back and forth, but it's like the pendulum movement back and forth.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I had to become more resilient, and I think that's something, when you're very sensitive to vibrations, you suffer, and one time I said, Mother said, I said, I can feel, she said, I feel that all the time when you're feeling all these pain and this and that. She said, that's basically what I'm feeling all the time, because I'm working out all these problems for everybody, the world, so whenever she sees the yogis, she will suck in their problem of agya, the Vishuddhi. That's why she said the Vishuddhi was horrible in the West, and particularly Catholic countries, the suffering she had with the left Vishuddhi. So you work on the left Vishuddhi, take the vibrations out. It's like cement, if it's a rock, you press it, press harder, and it's just like so much pressure there, as you, and she still didn't feel it, and you're kind of pressing as much as you can. But these are things that sometimes you don't realize, and we I guess what I felt was that we should have been more alert about trying to give Mother time to, for her physical body to recuperate, giving her time out so she spends time away from all the traveling and everything we did. So that was my, insight. I felt that, we really needed to be more alert about our own mother, about how she's working it out. So often, we take it for granted, oh, she's the goddess,
Yeah.
but the physical body is still there, but we don't recognize the magnitude of what she's working out in her physical body. She said, "You're all cells in my body." What does that mean? I mean, it's hard to conceive, but this is a divine being, and we're all, components within that divine body. So we're all cells, and if the cell's cancerous or problems, it's going to cause problems to the goddess. So I don't think we really understand how, the I guess what that implies, because it's kind of like, we're in the body of the divine. What does that mean? But when you start to sort of look at it from mother's perspective, and how, she's working out all these problems for everybody, and then on a global scale, and not just Saj Yoga, but a global scale, all the things that are going on, so kind of puts it in perspective,
Yeah,
but now
maybe.
we're the instruments. We have to be at that level as well. We can't be, embroiled in our own personal sort of dramas and problems, because this is just bringing our own frequency down, our own vibrational level down. And I think we have to, recognize the power that we have, that she's given us, because she said, many times, I've given you all my powers.
She has, yeah.
And then she always said, you have to assume your powers. You can't just sort of, hide away and not assume your powers. So in that time, after Brompton Square, I went back to Australia, and there was a lot of problems in Australia. And I walked into it like a hornet's nest of, problems. And I came back and I thought, the leader's off, his wife was off, the whole collective was going off in a different tangent. They're all mesmerized. And it was a bit of a shock for me to come out of this beautiful cocoon of vibrations into this, hellhole of, void, and all this agya and void and stuff. And you kind of realize that, Sahaj yogis have to be always alert about, not going off in, in the right or the left, to always be in the central path, because it's very easy for people to get caught up and go off, particularly around when if there's influences coming from the left side, then people get mesmerized, and lots of problems can happen, in a whole collective. So I think that's the challenge for us as yogis. We have to be alert, aware, and be conscious about, our own connection. Because when the connection's not strong, you can deviate, you can go into different, go to the left side or the right side.
It resonates with the story that Kay and Kingsley, we were talking to them a few weeks ago, and they were talking about this mesmerism that took place, and the collective was led away from
Yeah.
strategy and how we have to be.
There's some good examples of it, when you come into that from, like you're with mother, and then all of a sudden you're thrust into this, and you see the whole collective is caught up.
Which
was
year was this then? This was 1984, 85?
Yeah, 84, 85 when I came, 85 when I came back after the India tour. So I came back to Burwood. I was staying in the ashram there, and the leader and the leader's wife were completely off the planet, and then all the people around them were caught up, So it was kind of like I'm thrust into this, kind of like this vibrational cesspit. I felt awful, like really caught up, and it was a struggle, because you long for that time with mother, and then you see
Yes.
how people are behaving, and they're not, they just sort of, I don't know what they're often this sort of ego trip, and
Yes.
then the void was caught up. So sometimes yogis go off, and their ego and the void, and then negativity works through them, or they get mesmerized. They channel stuff, and then pretty soon the whole collective can get mesmerized, But I think that whole time was pretty bad. And then, I was just shoe-beating it, and I was suffering, my vibrations were sort of suffering, to try and work it out. But then I thought, okay, I'm here. I've got to, make the most of it, work it out. I just got married, and then, I was, sort of trying to
There were
navigate
two of
that.
you.
in India. After
Okay.
the India tour, sort of came over to England a bachelor, and then came back to India, and then got married, and then we started a family fairly quickly, So that sort of kept me in Australia for a long time. So I was just living in an ashram, and then we sort of stayed, in that in collective situation. So
This was in
after
Sydney then.
I was in Sydney, yeah. So I came back to Sydney. I really grew up in Sydney, and then I came back to Sydney, and I was living in Burwood, but the vibes had changed, as I said, that and then I moved to another ashram after that in Chatswood, and then eventually to a place called Cremorne, which is on the north side, and then to Annandale, off Annandale Ashram. Then after that to a Gordon Ashram, which is in the north. So I moved all over the place, in different ashrams, and I was kind of like the coordinator or leader of the ashram at the time. And then having to deal with the sort of leadership problems which were there at the time, and then shoe beating and doing, bundans and praying to Mother, please, Mother, work it out. And then at one stage I just felt, I've just got to go and tell Mother. But then when I meditated, she said, no, it's not time. Like I just had this insight that it's not the right time. So obviously these things are all part of her play, and we just have to witness it and not react to it. Because I was getting reactive, and I thought, well, I've just got to be more detached about it, because she has a plan and she's working this out. So from this, people will either they'll come back into the center, or they'll spin out completely. So spun out the leadership, and some of the people around the leaders got completely spun out. The leader's wife was pretty bad, and so she got spun out. And then after that, it sort of calms down, and then another cycle happens, and then you'll see more dramas playing out. But it's when you're in an ashram, I think one of the good things it does is that it makes you more aware of different personalities and how to deal with different personalities, left-sided people, right-sided people, people that are with mental illness, drug addicts, all sorts of combinations of different things. When you live in this collective situation, we've got everything, thrown in there in the mix. So you have to learn how to be able to navigate and try to, keep yourself in balance, not react to this stuff, and just try and help them as much as you can, whatever vibrational support you give, and try to keep yourself in balance, so you don't get caught up with it all. Because I think leadership is always a challenge for people, because in those days, Mother said, you don't challenge your leader, and the leader's up here, and people were sort of some leaders were very aggressive and right-sided, but I think, as Mother said at the time, that it was necessary to bring, to discipline people, bring people up, not that I was aggressive and right-sided at that time. I was kind of like just, I actually didn't want to be the leader. I was always sort of on that side. I just wanted to run away from it sometimes. So I guess before I was up in a cave somewhere in the Himalayas meditating, and I didn't have to worry about all this stuff.
It must have been pretty tough being having a young family, being young parents, newly married, being a leader. How are you sort of juggling all those
Um,
roles?
I never took it that seriously. I think that's probably why I wasn't sort of, I guess sort of, I said, Mother, you're doing this, I'm not really the leader. I'm just there, whatever I can do to make things work out. I just try to be as I guess balanced as possible, and then we had a lot of fun. I think that's the thing, I didn't take it so seriously, like I was never that, I was always stirring people up and having a lot of fun. I'm kind of like, if people know me, I'm kind of like always joking and having fun with people, and teasing people, and just that Krishna quality, that Vishuddhi, you're always joking and prodding people. I never could take it that seriously, to be honest. And I think that's always keep you in balance, you're not you're never too serious about it,
Yeah.
And then, I never lost sight of, who Mother is, I mean, I think those experiences that I've had are just so profound, and they're so part of me that I could never doubt anything. The doubtless awareness was there from a very early age, like from the very beginning. I had this constant feeling of this, you know, Shimadaji as being, you know, the goddess, and understanding that feeling of that I've served her and been with her. So this is kind of like part of how I felt. I couldn't separate, you know, couldn't sort of how would I describe it? It was just innately built within me, and I know what's right, what's wrong. I could see very clearly, you know, if people were off, the leadership was off, I could see it straight away. And that's the trouble, because I see it and
Yeah.
I know it. It's like innate, and I can see when things are going, you know,
Mm.
off on a different tangent. And that made it harder in a sense, because I could, you know, have to witness things more, because, you know, I at one stage I was sort of very reactive, and I thought, no, I've got to be just witnessing, because, you know, in my meditation, mother was telling me, you know, no, just it's all part, I know everything. And that's the
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
She
Mother
does.
should know this, mother should know that, you know. And there's a lot of people which feel, you know, oh, you know, people mistreated mother and did this and did that. But the thing is that this is mother's, she's the goddess. I mean, she's this is a play that works out. So in a way, you know, everybody is playing their role. And there's no way that none of this is happening randomly. That's what I feel, you know, like it's all part of her play. Some people made mistakes. There's obviously, you know, there's mistakes that have been made, you know, and I think, you know, this complexity of the family as well. It you know, makes it more interesting, we could say. And I
Yeah.
think that's one thing Mother made me very clear
Mm.
to me, that the family are not divine. And this idea that, you know, I think some people think, oh, the family is divine, you know, CP is an incarnation of Shiva and all this. It's just, mother told me exactly, you know, at the time, she told me, you know, not, you know, all sorts of things. And I won't say it publicly, but I know that, you know, people have to realize that this divinity is not there. I mean, they're good people, you know, they've
Yeah.
obviously had
Absolutely.
their role to play, but they're archetypal. I mean, it seems that like archetypes playing a role in this play of the Adi Shakti, you know,
Yeah.
and they basically there for a reason for this play, you know, and you've got, you know, some good things, some bad things that come of that as well. And I think yogis have to be a little bit more discriminating to see, you know, that they shouldn't be elevating anyone. I mean, of course, we have respect, but we shouldn't be putting them up to this deification, which I think some yogis do, you know.
Mm.
And I
It's
think
a
that's
very
always,
simple thing, actually. It just reminds one of Kabir, Sant Kabir's Doha, where he says, Guru Gobindo khade kake log lagum pao, Balihari Guru aapne Govindiya bata. So, like you're saying, our relationship is with Shamataji, who is the divine, who showed us the way to connect with the divine. And so, yes, love and respect for everyone, but the connection, the divine connection is Shrimataji, of course.
yeah. And I think that's one thing, you know, being with mother, that's one thing that she always, you know, gives you that awareness, you know, that, you know, everything coming through her, you know. I mean, I'll tell you a little story. I did something for, you know, with the house was being renovated, there's all sorts of things going on, painting and wallpapering stuff. And CP asked me, he said, can you, Mr. Alex, can do something in my room, because mother was doing everything in the house around, but not his bedroom. So I think he felt a little bit left out, that mother
Yeah.
wasn't doing anything in his bedroom. So he asked me, "Can you come and do something?" And I said, "Painting, and this needs painting, that." So I just went up there and I did what he asked me to do.
Yeah.
I didn't think anything of it, you know, but Shimadaji, she's, you know, when I came down, Shimadaji said to me, because his room was on the floor above Shimadaji's room, and I came down after I finished it all, and she said to me, "Why are you doing this work for him?" You know, and I said, "Oh, he's asked me to do." And she said, "Who is your guru?" I said,
Okay.
"You are Shimadaji." He said, why are you doing anything for him? Did I say you could?" And I said, "No, Shimada." I pulled my ears. I said, "I'm so sorry." She blasted me. And she said, "You don't know who he is. You don't know who he was." You said,
Wow.
you follow him and you'll be out of Saj Yoga in no time." That's what
Wow.
she said to me. And I was like shocked. You said, "Go and beat him with shoes. Every day, beat him with shoes." So
Oh,
I was, you know, shoe beating him, you know, because, you know, this is, you know, mother's telling me I was just down there shoe beating, you know, because I was shocked, you know. I thought, what? And I felt like, wow, this has showed me something, you know, like mother sort of giving me this blasting, just roasting, and I felt really bad. It's the first time mother had sort of been like that, and she was quite upset, and quite angry with me, and kind of took me aback a little bit, and then I reflected on that, and at the time, it sort of didn't occur to me, but later on, I realized, how this relationship, you've got to be so careful, because he kept asking me to do stuff for him, and he always wanted me to do little things, I just have to politely yes, say yes, and then I'd not do it. So it's a bit of a tricky dynamic.
Over
Mother
time.
said, don't do anything for him. You mustn't do it, mustn't follow, don't listen to him. So it's like very, very clear to me at that time, and I sort of course, I'm very polite. I mean, I'm not gonna,
Of course.
Yeah.
say anything. It's in his house. So as always, it's a very tricky sort of situation, but I had to politely pretend, not to, yes, yes, and then not do it. But all these sort of things, and for me, it was a little bit, that dynamic was a little bit more tricky to work when I was staying there.
Interesting.
This is really amazing that you've shared this with us, because as time goes by, there is sort of that clarity straight from Srimataji, that direction that she gave you. I think
Yeah,
more and more
I
people
mean,
need to know that.
and I think it's so important at this point in time, because a lot of people, I have a lot of respect for the family. I mean, the mother's family, we have to have that innate respect.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have to also understand that we have to, Shumaraji comes first. She is the goddess. She is the one we're worshiping. We're putting all attention. We shouldn't be elevating the family to anywhere near where Shumaraji is. I mean, they're, much, at a much lower level than that. And we have to be aware of that, and never stray from that, because I know that some people, putting the photograph of CP next to mother's altar and things like that. So I kind of a bit shocked that people are sort of deifying family members, but but
I
as
mean,
I said,
yeah,
the
it
mother
is.
family,
Yeah, it
we
is
have to
what it
respect.
is, isn't it? It's Shemataji, and that's Shemataji's family.
Yeah,
That's her business. That's over there.
yeah.
But it's
Because
not so easy, because in
yeah,
India, for example, I'm from India. I know in India you kind of make everything is centered around the family, So yes,
Yeah,
Srimataji is there, but it's also like, I mean, we met Sadhna Didi when we were at International Sahaj Public School in Dharamshala,
yeah,
and she's lovely, so
yeah.
loving,
yeah,
like a mum, and you
yeah.
can feel the
They're
love
lovely. Yeah,
vibrations and everything. But yeah, it's just to sort of remind ourselves yet again that it's all emanating from
from
Srimataji,
humanity.
goddess.
Exactly.
and
Well,
and
look, they're lovely people. I mean, they really gentle, loving, kind. There's nothing. There's that I've spent a lot of time with them. They're very
yes,
respectful. They have that quality. That's real quality. And it's sad that both sisters are sort of got this conflict together, but individually they're both very sweet and loving. They've got those qualities.
yes,
Of Shamaji. And I think, I mean, it's just a Maya. I mean, I couldn't imagine how, how to
Yeah,
this whole Maya of being part of the family, and then,
yeah,
she's your mother or she's a grandmother. I mean, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
it must be so difficult for
yeah,
for
yeah,
them,
yes,
yeah,
must
in a
be.
sense. And then, Sahaj Yoga's grown so much over the years. When in those days when we were there, it was, it was smaller, it was like more, mother had direct contact. She knew everybody. So that's the other thing that I found incredible, is that she knew everybody. Like
mm.
every yogi she knows. And she said, I know you from your Kundalini. But
Kundalini,
she'd
yeah,
ask about the family, how's your father? And is your father better? I mean, she knew all the things which were happening around different people, and she'd be able to work on their problems and help them. But the attention for detail of individual problems that they have just astounded me. I mean, she's just penetrate into the roots of where that person is at that particular time, and how they needed to be, what they needed to do. And that loving quality of a mother is just incredible, and this compassion she had, she's working day and night. And that's the thing that, when you're with her, I found it hard to keep up. I mean, I was a young, 23-year-old, and I was exhausted. I mean,
Yeah.
and Shamaji would go from country to country,
Yeah.
and and having sort of all these experiences, and then she would, arrive at the next country full of, energy and vitality, and then all the people would look after her in that country, and then they'd be exhausted, and the mother would go to the next country, and the same thing would happen, and she would travel all around, these different countries, constantly traveling and giving realization programs. And we never gave up. It never stopped. The intensity of that was phenomenal. And traveling to North America and doing programs in North America, traveling around Europe, going to India, traveling around India, giving realization, programs, and
Non-stop.
we forget about, Shamaji, she's in her 60s, right? And this intensity of her work was just so awesome. I mean, it's hard to imagine that anybody physically capable to do any of that, even if you're, we couldn't keep up, young people couldn't
Yes,
keep up,
absolutely. Yeah.
So it was a, really incredible effort, and the sheer the vibrations that come with her every time she coming from one place to another. You just feel this incredible ball of vibrations going out, penetrating every yogi, going into the whole environment, going to that whole country. And this is the dynamic that she brings, and you see that divinity working out, it's phenomenal. Around her you just feel like a complete bliss casually, because
Totally.
you're in a
Totally.
total cushion of vibrations. It's like a bubble,
Yeah.
but you're just in that, and you never want to leave that, you just want to stay in that blissed out state all the time,
Yeah.
But then she said once, she said, if you're at the, I said to her mother, well, why can't I just stay at that blissful state? She said, because you need to do the work. You need to be out there. You're my instrument. You
Yeah.
have to be doing, giving realization, because that's our job. We're to emancipate humanity, and then we have to work it all out. So no shortcuts. We have
Yeah.
to
No, you can't
really
hide
keep
away.
it. So I mean that's the experience of being with mother. When you're traveling with her to different countries, and then you see all the amount of time and effort she puts in to the programs, to the new people, to the yogis, and every little detail, marriages, resolving problems, troubleshooting, helping children,
Yeah.
working out country leaders, like so many things, just managing everything, and then seeing how she's managing, the family, her family, and then the wife of a diplomat, they're doing all those things. So it's just this multi-dimensional sort of things going on, and then the universe, what she's doing on a subtle level, We were sort of joking, when she was packing to go to India, she pulled out all the suitcases, and we unpacked the suitcases, all the saris, like just so many suitcases full of sari, these big Samsonite, cases,
Yes.
these old Samsonite cases just full of saris. So we're moving everything around, putting saris here, moving, opening up one empty one, moving saris to another one. Just goes on for a day, like, a few hours of doing this, then close it up, I'll put it back. And then next day, the same thing, moving these saris around. And we're kind of thinking, what's going on? It's like this must be, organizing the universe. There's some subtle things are working out. We have no idea, but then you feel that something momentous was going on, in the world. Things were working out somewhere, we didn't have no idea. But these are the sorts of, things you see mothers doing, and you have to be completely detached, because any person who was a little bit sort of thinking about it, why we just moved all this yesterday? Why are we doing this again? You'll be sort of getting upset with it, wondering why mother's doing that. Why is mother doing that? But you just have to be completely in detachment, witness state, and then it's enjoyable, because you just moving things, you know. Another really sweet story was I just remembered there was CP had a servant called Gajin Singh. He was a little short little guy, and Shamaji didn't like him. I mean, he was causing her, you know, he's doing things to annoy her, you know, like he was, and she said, he's taking my shoes. He's
Yeah.
taking my, so basically she said, he's hidden them somewhere. And what the guy was doing was stealing her shoes and taking the shoes out to sell in the market.
Oh,
Well, gosh. This is in
So
Washington Square.
yeah, he wasn't a yogi. He was like a servant that CP had, like a manservant, you know.
Yes.
And he wouldn't do things for mother. Mother would ask him. He wouldn't. He would only do things for CP. He was a really, you know. And then so anyway, one day she said, we have to find the shoes, you know. And so we're looking all around, and then we're walking past. There was a big chest at the, you know, underneath the stairs, you know, like as we go on the basement level. And she said, have a look in there. And then I opened up the chest, and all his shoes were there. And it was like opening up a window of a breeze, or, you know, it just came blasting me. And I sort of went, wow. And she sort of, I looked at mother, and she sort of wobbled her head, and she said, the shoes are the best because the feet are in the shoes. And then she said, take them back to my room, because she had this, you know, cabinet with all the shoes.
wow.
So I took every pair of shoes, put it to my heart, and I took it up, and one by one, like there was like 12 pairs of shoes, and I did that, you know, like for a long time I was just enjoying the vibrations. But you know, and then she said to me, go and beat him up, beat that servant, you know. So I had to go down, and in the, like, he's a little fellow, and then I picked him up and I pushed him against the wall, and I said, "Don't you ever do anything against my mother? I'll kill you," you know. And he's so, and so I, you know, I shook him around, and I didn't beat him, but I just scared him.
Put the fear
I
of
didn't.
God in him.
I just scared him, and so he was a little, you know, a bit wiser for that. You know, he made sure that he wasn't doing anything, and we know you're stealing, and he, you know. So I said, you know, you don't know what you're doing. You'll be burning in hell, you know. So I sort of scared him, you know. But these sort of, you know, around mother, there's all these little dramas which work out. Sometimes you see people doing crazy stuff, you know. What's amazing is, you know, how people have tried to steal and defraud mother. You know, I couldn't believe that, you know. Some of the leaders long, you know, back in the early days, you know, taking money and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
That was a real eye opener, you know, like I thought, God, how could they do that, you know?
Mm.
Yeah.